The morning sun cast harsh shadows across the cracked asphalt of Maple Street, where abandoned buildings stood like tombstones of a forgotten neighborhood. Rowan Morris pressed his back against the cold brick wall, watching the steam rise from his instant coffee, his only luxury in a world that had stripped everything else away. 6 months, 6 long months since Sterling Automotive had fired him for a crime he didn't commit. 6 months of carrying his toolbox from shelter to shelter, from park bench to doorway, until even hope seemed too heavy to bear. But Rowan refused to let the streets break his spirit. Every morning, he'd polish his tools with the same care he once gave million-dollar engines. A mechanic without his tools, his grandfather used to say, is like a bird without wings. The sound of a struggling engine jolted him from his memories. A sleek black Mercedes-Benz S-Class limped down the street, white smoke billowing from under its hood like a cry for help. The car wheezed, coughed, and finally surrendered directly in front of Rowan's makeshift camp. Inside the luxury vehicle, he could see a woman gripping the steering wheel with manicured hands, her blonde hair perfectly styled. Despite the chaos of her situation, she tried the ignition again. Nothing. The engine was dead. Rowan watched as she fumbled with her phone, probably calling for roadside assistance that would take hours to arrive in this forgotten part of the city. He knew that sound, that particular death rattle of a blown gasket. It was fixable, if you had the right hands, his hands. This was it, the moment he'd been waiting for without knowing it. 6 months of sleeping on cardboard had led to this exact intersection of desperation and opportunity. Rowan stood slowly, brushing dust from his worn jeans, and picked up his toolbox. His reflection caught in the Mercedes tinted window, a proud black man reduced to shadows. But still standing, still fighting, he walked toward the car with measured steps, each one carrying the weight of his dreams, his dignity, and his last chance at redemption. The woman inside looked up as his shadow fell across her windshield. Their eyes met through the glass, hers wide with surprise and perhaps fear, his steady with quiet determination. This was more than a broken car. This was destiny calling, and Rowan Morris was ready to answer. He raised his hand and gently tapped on the driver's side window, his heart hammering against his ribs like an engine fighting to start. Everything he'd lost, everything he hoped to regain, came down to the next 60 seconds. The woman hesitated, her finger hovering over the window control. Time stood still on Maple Street, where broken dreams and broken engines were about to collide in the most unexpected way. Everly Stewart's finger trembled on the window control as she stared at the man outside her car. Every instinct screamed danger. She was alone in an unfamiliar neighborhood, with a stranger approaching her disabled vehicle, but something in his eyes stopped her from hitting the gas and fleeing on whatever engine power remained. Those eyes, they held no malice, no threat. Instead, she saw something she recognized from her own mirror during the hardest days of building her empire. Desperation mixed with unwavering determination. The window descended slowly, like a curtain rising on an unscripted performance. "Ma'am," Rowan said, his voice steady despite his racing pulse, "I couldn't help but notice you're having car trouble." Everly studied him carefully. His clothes were worn but clean, his posture proud despite obvious hardship. The toolbox in his weathered hands looked professional, well-maintained. "The engine just died," she replied cautiously. "I've already called for assistance." "In this neighborhood," Rowan shook his head gently, "roadside service won't prioritize this area. You'll be waiting 3, maybe 4 hours, minimum." The truth stung because Everly knew he was right. She'd already been on hold for 20 minutes before giving up. "And you can fix it?" she asked, skepticism creeping into her voice. "Mom, I've been fixing engines since I was 12 years old. Worked at Sterling Automotive for 15 years before—" He paused, swallowing the bitter memory. "Before life took a different turn." Everly's breath caught. Sterling Automotive. She knew that name. One of her competitors, though they'd gone out of business recently amid some scandal. "You worked there, head mechanic," Rowan said with quiet pride. "I can tell by the sound your engine made that it's a blown head gasket, probably overheated because your coolant system's been leaking for weeks. You've been ignoring that sweet smell in your car, haven't you?" Her eyes widened. He was absolutely right about the smell. How could he possibly know that? Rowan set his toolbox down and stepped closer to the car, his movements slow and non-threatening. "Look, I'm going to be straight with you because I've got nothing left to lose. I'm homeless, been living on these streets for 6 months. But I'm still the best damn mechanic you'll find in this city." The raw honesty hit Everly like a physical blow. She'd built her fortune on reading people, on seeing potential where others saw problems. This man, proud, skilled, fallen from grace, reminded her of herself 20 years ago. "What are you proposing?" she asked quietly. Rowan took a deep breath, knowing this moment would define his future. "I'll fix your car right here. Right now, for free, no charge, no tricks in exchange." He met her gaze directly. "I want you to give me a job interview. An interview. One chance to prove I'm more than what you see on the surface. One opportunity to show you that skills and character don't disappear just because circumstances change." Everly sat in stunned silence. In 30 seconds, this stranger had diagnosed her car's problem, admitted his desperate situation, and made the most audacious business proposal she'd heard in years. "What if you can't fix it?" she asked. "Then you've lost nothing but time, and I'll have proven I'm exactly what the world thinks I am." His jaw tightened. "But if I can fix it, then you get your interview," Everly finished, surprising herself. Rowan nodded once, sharp and decisive. "Deal." Everly Stewart, CEO of a multi-million-dollar automotive empire, looked at Rowan Morris, homeless mechanic with calloused hands and unbroken dreams, and made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "Deal." Rowan's hands moved with the precision of a surgeon as he lifted the Mercedes hood, revealing the complex heart of German engineering. Steam hissed from the radiator like an angry serpent, but he didn't flinch. He'd seen worse. "Pop the trunk, please," he called to Everly, who was now standing beside the car, her designer heels clicking nervously on the broken pavement. "I need to check your coolant reservoir." She hesitated. Opening the trunk felt like crossing another invisible line, moving from cautious observer to active participant in this strange encounter. "The button's on your key fob," Rowan added gently. Sensing her uncertainty, the trunk opened with a soft mechanical whir, revealing an interior more luxurious than most people's living rooms. But Rowan wasn't interested in the expensive leather or hidden compartments. His trained eye went straight to the automotive fluids. "When's the last time you had this serviced?" he asked, pulling out the coolant reservoir cap and examining the murky liquid inside. "I honestly don't remember," Everly admitted, feeling suddenly foolish. "My assistant usually handles that." Rowan nodded without judgment. "Most people don't think about maintenance until something breaks, but this baby—" He patted the car's frame affectionately. "She's been trying to tell you she's in trouble for weeks." As he worked, Rowan began narrating his process, partly to demonstrate his expertise, partly to ease the tension that hung between them like morning fog. "See this residue around the radiator cap? That's dried coolant. Your gasket's been leaking slowly, causing your engine to run hot. Most mechanics would tell you this needs a complete engine rebuild. Cost you $15,000 minimum." Everly's eyes widened. 15,000. "But they'd be wrong," Rowan continued, his hands already deep in the engine compartment. "Sometimes the simplest problems hide behind the most expensive diagnoses." He pulled out a worn but well-organized toolbox and began selecting instruments with the care of a craftsman. Each tool had its place, its purpose, its story. These weren't just instruments, they were extensions of his soul. "You really live here?" Everly asked quietly, glancing at the cardboard and tarps arranged behind a dumpster that she now realized formed a makeshift shelter. Rowan's hands never stopped moving. 6 months now, not by choice, but life doesn't always give you options, just challenges. "What happened at Sterling Automotive?" The wrench in his hand tightened slightly. "They accused me of stealing parts. Said someone saw me loading premium components into my personal vehicle." His voice carried the weight of injustice. "Turns out the real thief was the owner's son. But by the time the truth came out, Sterling was bankrupt and I was blacklisted." Everly felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. She'd heard whispers about Sterling's corruption, but she'd never considered the collateral damage. The innocent employees caught in the crossfire. "Why didn't you fight it, Sue, for wrongful termination?" Rowan laughed bitterly. "With what money, what lawyer takes a case for a black mechanic against a white-owned company with no guarantee of payment?" He looked up from the engine, his eyes meeting hers. "Sometimes the system works exactly as designed, ma'am, and sometimes people like me learn that justice and fairness aren't the same thing." The raw truth of his words hung in the air between them. Everly had built her empire by being tough, by making hard decisions, by winning at all costs, but standing in this forgotten neighborhood, watching a man fight for his dignity with nothing but skill and hope, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years, doubt about the world she'd helped create. "There," Rowan announced, straightening up with a satisfied grunt. "Try starting her now." Everly slid back into the driver's seat, her heart pounding for reasons she couldn't quite name. She turned the key. The engine purred to life like a contented cat, smooth and powerful once again. Impossible, she whispered, through the windshield. She saw Rowan wiping his hands on an old rag, a quiet smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He'd done it. Fixed her car with nothing but skill, experience, and the determination of a man with everything to prove. Now came the hard part. Everly stepped out of her now purring Mercedes, staring at Rowan with a mixture of amazement and disbelief. The engine that had been dead minutes ago now hummed with perfect precision, as if it had never been broken at all. "How?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Rowan closed the hood with gentle finality. "Temporary coolant bypass and pressure adjustment. Your gasket isn't blown. It's just slightly warped from overheating. I've bought you time to get it properly serviced, but she'll run fine for now. You said it would be expensive to fix. For most mechanics, yes, they'd replace everything instead of addressing the root cause." He packed his tools with methodical care. "Sometimes experience teaches you that the most complex problems have simple solutions. If you're willing to look deeper." Everly found herself studying this man with new eyes. 20 minutes ago, he'd been just another homeless person she'd have avoided eye contact with. Now he stood before her as someone who'd accomplished something her expensive dealership mechanics claimed was impossible. "A deal's a deal," she said finally. "You want that interview?" Rowan straightened, hope flickering in his chest like a candle in wind. "Yes, ma'am. My company, Stewart Automotive Group, has 12 luxury dealerships across 3 states. We specialize in high-end imports. Mercedes, BMW, Audi, Porsche." She studied his face for recognition. "Ever worked on European vehicles?" "Every day for 15 years, Rowan replied. "German engineering's my specialty. Italian too, if you've got any Ferraris giving you trouble." Despite everything, Everly felt herself smile. "We might." She pulled out her phone, scrolling through her calendar. "I can offer you an interview Thursday morning, 10 a.m., my corporate office downtown." Rowan's expression shifted, the hope in his eyes dimming slightly. "Ma'am, I appreciate that, but—" He gestured toward his worn clothes, his makeshift shelter. "I'm not exactly dressed for a corporate interview." Everly paused, suddenly seeing the situation through his eyes. How could a homeless man present himself professionally at her gleaming corporate headquarters? The security guards alone would probably turn him away at the door. "What do you suggest?" she asked, genuinely curious. "Let me prove myself where it matters. In your shop, give me a problem car, something your regular mechanics can't figure out. One vehicle, one chance to show you what I can do." His voice gained strength. "If I fail, you owe me nothing. If I succeed, you get the job. I get a real interview in your office, treated like any other candidate." He met her gaze steadily. "All I'm asking for is a chance to be judged on my skills, not my circumstances." Everly considered this. It was unconventional. Certainly her HR department would have a collective heart attack. But something about Rowan's quiet confidence, his willingness to stake everything on his abilities, reminded her of her younger self, the girl who'd built an empire from nothing but determination and vision. "Which location?" she asked. "Whichever one has your toughest problems. The cars other mechanics have given up on." A slow smile spread across Everly's face. She knew exactly the place. "Stewart Automotive West. We've got a 2019 Porsche 911 that's been sitting in Bay 3 for 2 months. Engine problems, 4 different mechanics have looked at it, including 2 Porsche specialists. They're all stumped." "What are the symptoms?" "Intermittent power loss, strange noises from the engine bay, dashboard warnings that don't match any diagnostic codes." She shrugged. "The owner's threatening to sue us if we don't fix it soon." Rowan's eyes lit up with the excitement of a puzzle solver, presented with the ultimate challenge. "When?" "Tomorrow morning, 7 a.m., before the shop officially opens." She hesitated. "But Rowan, this isn't charity. If you can't solve it, I can't help you. I've got a business to run and a reputation to protect." "Understood completely," Rowan replied without hesitation. "Just tell me one thing. If I fix your impossible Porsche, will you judge me fairly? Not as a homeless man asking for handouts, but as a mechanic who earned his shot." Everly extended her hand, her decision crystallizing with surprising clarity. "You fix that Porsche, and I'll give you the fairest interview of your life." They shook hands. His calloused and oil-stained, hers soft and manicured, sealing a deal that neither quite understood yet. As Everly climbed back into her Mercedes, she caught Rowan's reflection in her side mirror. He stood watching her leave, toolbox in hand, shoulders straight, despite everything life had thrown at him. For the first time in months, she found herself genuinely excited about tomorrow. Dawn crept across the city like a hesitant promise, painting the sky in shades of hope and uncertainty. Rowan had barely slept, his mind racing through every possible scenario that could explain a Porsche's mysterious symptoms. He'd walked the 12 miles to Stewart Automotive West. Arriving an hour early to study the building that might hold his future, the dealership stood like a temple to automotive excellence. Gleaming glass, pristine white columns, and a showroom filled with machines that cost more than most people's homes. Through the windows, he could see the Porsche sitting in Bay 3, dark and silent as a sleeping predator. At exactly 7 a.m., Everly's Mercedes pulled into the parking lot. She emerged wearing a tailored business suit that probably cost more than Rowan had earned in his last month at Sterling, but her expression was focused, professional. "You're early," she observed, unlocking the service entrance. "Punctuality's free," Rowan replied, "and right now it's about all I can afford." Inside the service bay, fluorescent lights hummed to life, revealing a workspace that was every mechanic's dream. State-of-the-art diagnostic equipment, pneumatic lifts, tool arrays that sparkled like surgical instruments, but Rowan's attention went straight to the Porsche. The 2019 911 Carrera sat in Bay 3 like a beautiful puzzle waiting to be solved. Midnight blue paint gleamed under the lights, but Rowan could see the frustration in every detail. Diagnostic cables hanging loose, panels that had been removed and replaced multiple times, the general aura of mechanical defeat. "Service records?" he asked, pulling on work gloves that had seen better days but still did their job. Everly handed him a tablet thick with documentation. 4 mechanics, 67 hours of labor, 3 different theories, 0 solutions. The owner, Mrs. Patterson, bought this car for her husband's retirement. It worked perfectly for 6 months, then started acting up randomly. Rowan scrolled through the reports, his trained eye picking out patterns the other mechanics had missed. "Says here they've replaced the fuel pump, cleaned the throttle body, updated the software twice." Until he looked up. "What did they miss?" "If I knew that, we wouldn't need you," Everly said dryly. Rowan popped the hood and immediately noticed something the reports hadn't mentioned. The engine bay was almost too clean. Someone had pressure washed it recently, removing the natural accumulation of dust and grime that told a car's true story. "Who authorized cleaning the engine bay?" he asked. Everly checked the records. "Marcus, our lead technician, said he wanted to start fresh with the diagnostics." "He destroyed the evidence," Rowan muttered, running his fingers along the engine components. "A dirty engine tells you where problems are coming from. Clean it too well and you're working blind." He started the Porsche, letting it idle while he listened, not just with his ears, but with his entire body, feeling for vibrations, irregularities. The subtle language engines spoke to those who knew how to listen. "Sounds perfect to me," Everly said after a few minutes. "That's the problem. Problems this intermittent don't happen randomly, they follow patterns." Rowan opened his toolbox and pulled out what looked like an old stethoscope. "Mind if I take her for a drive? In your—" Everly stopped herself before saying, "condition. With respect, this car is worth $120,000. Ma'am, I've test-driven cars worth twice that. My circumstances may have changed, but my skills haven't." He met her eyes steadily. "Trust me, or find someone else to solve your impossible problem." After a long moment, Everly tossed him the keys. "If you so much as scratch the paint, you'll never see me again," Rowan finished. "I understand." As he settled into the driver's seat, Rowan felt something he hadn't experienced in months. The connection between man and machine, the sacred bond between craftsman and creation. The Porsche's interior wrapped around him like a second skin, every control precisely where it belonged. He drove slowly through the empty streets, waiting, listening, feeling for the ghost in the machine. 10 minutes of perfect performance, then, there, a subtle hesitation during acceleration, lasting less than a second but definitely present. "Got you," he whispered. 20 minutes later he returned to find Everly pacing anxiously in the service bay. "Well?" she asked as he climbed out. "I know what's wrong," Rowan said with quiet confidence, "and it's something none of your mechanics would ever think to check." "What is it?" Rowan smiled, the first genuine smile he'd worn in months. "Give me 2 hours, and I'll show you exactly why this car has been driving everyone crazy." The hunt was on. 2 hours later, Everly returned to find Rowan lying on his back beneath the Porsche, his legs extending from under the car like a mechanic's version of the Wicked Witch of the West. The rhythmic tapping of metal against metal echoed through the service bay. "Found something," she called out. "Found everything," came his muffled reply. "But you're not going to believe it." Rowan slid out from under the car, his face streaked with grease but his eyes bright with the satisfaction of a puzzle solved. In his hand, he held a small electronic component no bigger than a matchbox. Aftermarket performance chip, he announced, holding up the device. Hidden behind the air intake manifold where no one would think to look. Everly frowned. Performance chips aren't illegal. Half our customers install them. This one's different. Rowan connected his laptop to the device, lines of code scrolling across the screen. It's not just enhancing performance. It's programmed to create intermittent failures. Random power loss, false diagnostic codes, engine hesitation. Someone wanted this car to fail. That's impossible. Why would anyone... Sabotage, Rowan said quietly. Someone installed this chip specifically to cause problems that would be almost impossible to diagnose. Look at the programming. He turned the laptop toward her. It's set to activate randomly, never following the same pattern twice. Everly stared at the code, her mind racing through the implications. But who would do this and why? That's a question for you to answer. But I can tell you this chip was installed by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Professional grade work, expensive equipment. Rowan's expression grew serious. This wasn't a prank. This was calculated sabotage. As he spoke, Rowan was already working to remove the malicious device, his hands moving with practiced precision through the engine's complicated maze of wires and components. Within minutes, he'd extracted the chip completely and restored the original connections. "Try starting her now," he said. Everly turned the key, and the Porsche roared to life with the pure, powerful sound of German engineering operating exactly as intended. No hesitation, no irregularities, just mechanical perfection. "Take her for a drive," Rowan suggested. "Really push her, the sabotage program is gone." 20 minutes later, Everly returned with flushed cheeks and something approaching amazement in her eyes. "It's perfect, absolutely perfect, like a brand new car. Because now it is what it was meant to be," Rowan replied, wiping his hands on a shop towel. "No ghosts, no glitches, just honest engineering." Everly studied the sabotage chip Rowan had removed, turning it over in her manicured fingers like a piece of evidence from a crime scene. "Rowan, this changes everything if someone's sabotaging our customers' cars." "It gets worse," he interrupted gently. "This chip, it's custom-made. Look at the serial number etching. That's military-grade precision. Whoever did this has serious resources and technical expertise. Someone's targeting my business specifically, or testing their capabilities on high-end vehicles before moving to bigger targets." Rowan's expression grew grave. "Ma'am, with respect, this isn't just about fixing cars anymore. Someone's playing a much more dangerous game." Everly sank into a nearby chair, the weight of revelations settling over her like a cold blanket. In trying to solve a simple mechanical problem, they'd uncovered something far more sinister. "The other mechanics," she said slowly, "Marcus, Johnson, Rodriguez, they're all good technicians if they couldn't find this, because they were looking for mechanical failures, not intentional sabotage," Rowan finished. "When you've spent 15 years working on cars, you develop a feel for what's natural breakdown versus what's artificial. How? Experience with insurance fraud cases at Sterling, customers trying to create problems to get money from manufacturers, you learn to spot the signs." His voice carried the weight of hard-earned wisdom. "But this is more sophisticated than anything I've seen before." Everly stood abruptly, decision crystallizing in her mind. "Rowan, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest." "Always am, ma'am. If I hire you, not just for an interview, but actually hire you, would you be willing to help me figure out who's doing this? Because if someone's sabotaging our customers' cars, they're not just targeting my business, they're putting people's lives at risk." Rowan looked at her for a long moment, seeing past the wealthy businesswoman to the person underneath, someone facing a threat she didn't fully understand, someone who needed an ally with skills the corporate world couldn't provide. "Ma'am, if you're asking whether I'd help protect innocent people from whoever's behind this," he extended his hand, "you've got yourself a mechanic." As they shook hands for the second time in 2 days, neither realized they were stepping into something far more dangerous than a simple employment arrangement. The real game was just beginning. The Stewart Automotive corporate office occupied 3 floors of gleaming glass and steel in downtown's financial district, a world away from the broken streets where Rowan had spent the last 6 months as Everly's private elevator climbed toward the executive floor. He caught his reflection in the polished walls and hardly recognized himself. The transformation had taken 2 days. Everly had advanced him money for proper clothes, a conservative suit that fit his lean frame perfectly, dress shoes that didn't pinch, a haircut that restored his professional appearance. But the most important change was internal. For the first time in months, Rowan felt like himself again. "Second thoughts?" Everly asked, noticing his contemplative silence. Just thinking about how much can change in 72 hours, he replied. Monday I was sleeping behind a dumpster. Today I'm walking into a corporate boardroom. Today you're walking into a corporate boardroom as my new director of automotive security, Everly corrected. The position's never existed before, but after what you found in that Porsche, I think we need it. The elevator opened onto a corridor lined with awards, photos of luxury vehicles and panoramic views of the city skyline, but Rowan's attention was drawn to something else, the subtle tension in the air, the way conversations stopped as they passed, the curious and sometimes hostile glances from Everly's staff. They're wondering who the new guy is, he observed. Let them wonder, Everly replied crisply. What matters is results, not office politics. They entered a spacious conference room where 3 people were already seated. A silver-haired man in an expensive suit, a younger woman with sharp eyes and a tablet computer, and a broad-shouldered mechanic still wearing coveralls from the shop floor. Everyone, I'd like you to meet Rowan Morris, our new director of automotive security, Everly announced. Rowan, this is James Whitfield. My CFO Sarah Chen, head of operations, and Marcus Rodriguez, our lead service technician. Handshakes were exchanged, but Rowan sensed undercurrents of skepticism, particularly from Marcus, whose grip lingered a moment too long, as if testing Rowan's strength. Director of what exactly? James asked. His tone politely dubious, Everly activated a wall display showing photos of the sabotage chip Rowan had discovered. Someone's been intentionally sabotaging our customers' vehicles with sophisticated electronic devices. Rowan found this in Mrs. Patterson's Porsche after 4 of our best technicians couldn't solve the problem. The room fell silent. Marcus leaned forward, studying the images with professional interest. That's impossible. I personally inspected every component in that engine bay. You inspected every component you expected to find, Rowan replied diplomatically. This device was hidden behind the air intake manifold, disguised to look like part of the factory wiring harness. Unless you knew what to look for. And you knew what to look for because, Marcus's voice carried a subtle challenge, because I've seen similar sabotage attempts before, though never this sophisticated. Rowan met the other mechanic's gaze steadily. Someone with serious technical skills and expensive equipment is targeting high-end vehicles. The question isn't whether it's happening. The question is why, Sarah consulted her tablet. We've had 17 vehicles this year with unexplained electronic problems. Average repair time, 43 hours. Average cost to the company, $8,000 per vehicle. That's over $100,000 in losses, James calculated grimly. If this sabotage theory is correct, it's not a theory anymore, Everly interrupted. It's confirmed, which means we need to figure out who's doing this and why, before it escalates. Rowan cleared his throat. With permission, I'd like to examine those 17 problem vehicles. If the same sabotage chip is present in multiple cars, we can start building a pattern, installation dates, customer profiles, maybe even identify the saboteur. Assuming the other chips haven't been removed already, Marcus pointed out, whoever's doing this isn't stupid. They've probably covered their tracks. Maybe, Rowan agreed, but every criminal makes mistakes, even sophisticated ones. As the meeting continued, plans taking shape for a comprehensive investigation. None of them noticed the small listening device hidden beneath the conference table, or the fact that every word of their conversation was being transmitted to a receiver 3 blocks away, in a nondescript office building. A figure in expensive clothes smiled while listening to the recorded meeting through high-end headphones. Rowan Morris, the homeless mechanic who'd stumbled onto their carefully planned operation, was proving more dangerous than anticipated. Time to eliminate the problem permanently. The figure reached for a secure phone, dialing a number that would set deadly wheels in motion. We have a situation, they said quietly. The Morris problem needs to be resolved tonight. Back in the Stewart Automotive boardroom, Rowan felt a sudden chill, as if someone had walked over his grave. He glanced around the room, studying faces. Wondering why his instincts were suddenly screaming danger, he'd learned to trust those instincts during his months on the street. They'd kept him alive when nothing else would. Rowan's new apartment was modest but clean, a far cry from the cardboard shelter he'd called home just days earlier, as he sat at his small kitchen table, reviewing service records on his laptop. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The numbers didn't add up. The patterns felt too convenient, and Marcus's reaction in the meeting had been off. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Parking garage, level B2, come alone. I have information about who's sabotaging the cars. Friend. Every instinct screamed trap. But Rowan had learned that survival sometimes meant taking calculated risks. He grabbed his jacket and headed for the door, pausing only to slip a wrench into his pocket. Old habits from life on the streets. The Stewart Automotive corporate parking garage was eerily quiet at 9 p.m. Fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows between concrete pillars. Rowan's footsteps echoed as he descended to level B2, every nerve alert for danger. He found Everly's Mercedes parked in her reserved spot, engine running, driver's door slightly ajar. No sign of whoever had sent the text. "Hello?" he called out, his voice bouncing off concrete walls. A figure emerged from behind a support pillar. Marcus Rodriguez, but not the friendly mechanic from the meeting. This version of Marcus moved with predatory grace, his coveralls replaced by black clothing that seemed to absorb the harsh garage lighting. "Rowan Morris," Marcus said, his voice carrying a different accent now. Eastern European, maybe Russian. "The mechanic who sees too much." "Let me guess," Rowan replied, keeping his hands visible but ready. "You're not really from Texas." "Very good. Though Marcus Rodriguez has worked at Stewart Automotive for 3 years. Exemplary employee. Excellent reviews, completely trusted." The false smile disappeared. "Until you arrived and started asking uncomfortable questions." Rowan's mind raced through the implications. "You planted the sabotage chips, all 17 vehicles. Among other things, Stewart Automotive was never the target. It was the testing ground. We needed to perfect our methods before moving to more significant objectives. Government vehicles, military. You're smarter than we anticipated. That's unfortunate." Marcus pulled a pistol from beneath his jacket, keeping it low but clearly visible. "My employers prefer their operations to remain undetected." Rowan slowly raised his hands. But his eyes never left Marcus's face. "Your employers made a mistake. They underestimated Everly Stewart. She won't let this go. Miss Stewart will have other concerns very shortly, starting with the unfortunate accident that befalls her new director of automotive security." Marcus gestured toward Everly's Mercedes with the gun barrel. "Tragic, really. Homeless man finally gets his life together, only to die in a car accident caused by mechanical failure." The pieces clicked into place in Rowan's mind. "You sabotaged her car. Brake lines. Very subtle, very effective. The car will start normally, drive normally for several blocks. Then," Marcus shrugged, "these things happen with luxury vehicles, so complicated, so many things that can go wrong." Rage built in Rowan's chest, not just at the threat to his own life, but at the casual way this man planned to murder Everly. "She's done nothing to you. As she hired you, that was enough." Marcus stepped closer, confidence radiating from his posture. "But I'm curious, how did you know to look for the sabotage chip? Our intelligence suggested you were just a mechanic." "I was never just anything," Rowan replied quietly, "and you made a critical error, which was, you assumed I came here alone." The parking garage suddenly filled with light as police vehicles surrounded the area. Their spotlights turning night into day, officers emerged from behind concrete pillars and parked cars, weapons drawn but not yet aimed. Marcus's eyes widened in shock and fury. "Impossible! The text was encrypted. The text was traced before I even left my apartment." Rowan interrupted. "See? There's something you don't know about Everly Stewart. She didn't build her empire by taking unnecessary risks. When her new director of security gets a mysterious meeting request, she takes precautions." Detective Janet Wilson stepped into the light, her badge clearly visible. "Marcus Rodriguez, or whatever your real name is, you're under arrest for attempted murder, sabotage, and about 12 other charges I'm still counting." As handcuffs clicked around Marcus's wrists, Rowan felt a familiar presence beside him. Everly emerged from behind another car, her face pale but determined. "Are you hurt?" she asked. "No. But your car," he gestured toward the Mercedes. "Don't drive it. Brake lines are compromised." Everly nodded grimly. "The police will handle evidence collection, but Rowan, this isn't over. Marcus was working for someone and they're still out there." As Marcus was led away, he turned back with a smile that chilled the air. "You think you've won? This was just the beginning. My employers have resources you can't imagine, and now they know exactly who you are." The threat hung in the air like smoke from a fire that hadn't been extinguished. Only temporarily contained, Rowan and Everly stood in the bright glare of police lights, both realizing their victory had come with a price. They'd made themselves targets of an enemy, whose full power remained hidden in the shadows. The real danger was just beginning. 3 weeks after Marcus's arrest, Rowan had settled into his new role at Stewart Automotive, but the investigation had stalled, despite intensive interrogation. Marcus, whose real name was Viktor Petrov, a former Spetsnaz operative, had revealed nothing about his employers beyond cryptic warnings about their reach and resources. Rowan was reviewing security footage in his new office when Sarah Chen knocked on his door, her usual composed demeanor cracked with barely contained excitement. "We found something," she announced, closing the door behind her. "Or rather, our forensic accountant found something." She spread financial documents across Rowan's desk like a detective revealing evidence. "Look at the payment patterns to Marcus over the past year. His salary was deposited normally. But there were additional payments, always in cash, always through different shell companies." Rowan studied the records, his mechanical mind applying the same systematic thinking he used to diagnose engine problems. The amounts increase over time, small at first, then larger as the sabotage operation expanded. Exactly. But here's the interesting part. One of the shell companies made a mistake. They used the same bank routing number for 2 different transactions, 3 months apart. "Sloppy," Rowan observed. "Very. And that routing number traces back to a private investment firm called Meridian Holdings." Sarah's eyes gleamed with the satisfaction of a puzzle solved. "Guess who sits on Meridian's board of directors?" Before Rowan could answer, his office door burst open. Everly entered, her face flushed with anger and something that looked like betrayal. "We need to talk," she announced. "All of us. Conference room now." Minutes later, they sat around the same table where Rowan had first been introduced as Director of Automotive Security. But the atmosphere was entirely different, charged with tension and unspoken accusations. "James," Everly said without preamble, "how long have you been sabotaging my company?" James Whitfield, the silver-haired CFO who'd seemed so respectable just weeks earlier, didn't even try to deny it. Instead, he smiled with the calm confidence of a man who'd been expecting this moment. "Took you long enough to figure it out," he replied smoothly. "Though I must admit, hiring the homeless mechanic was an unexpected complication." Rowan felt pieces clicking into place. "Meridian Holdings, you're not just on the board, you're the primary investor." "Very good. Mr. Morris, though your detective work comes a bit late, I'm afraid." Sarah leaned forward aggressively. "Late for what?" James checked his expensive watch with theatrical precision. "Late to prevent the culmination of 18 months of careful planning, you see. Sabotaging a few luxury vehicles was never the real objective. It was simply the testing phase for something much more ambitious." "Which is?" Everly demanded. "A demonstration of capability for my international clients, governments and corporations, who need to know that modern vehicles can be compromised remotely, systematically and invisibly." James's smile grew colder. Stewart Automotive was the perfect laboratory. High-end vehicles, sophisticated clientele, and an owner too proud to admit her security was compromised. Rowan's blood chilled as the full scope of the operation became clear. "You've been selling sabotage technology to foreign governments. Among others, the ability to disable enemy vehicles, cause accidents for inconvenient politicians, create chaos in transportation systems. It's quite valuable in the right markets." "And the testing phase," Sarah asked, "concludes tonight at exactly 8 p.m. Every vehicle we've serviced over the past 18 months will experience simultaneous catastrophic failure. 53 cars spread across the metropolitan area, all failing at once during evening rush hour traffic." The room fell silent as the magnitude of James's plan sank in. 53 vehicles, all experiencing sudden brake failure, engine shutdown, or steering malfunction during the busiest traffic period of the day. "You're talking about mass murder," Everly whispered. "I'm talking about a product demonstration," James corrected. "My clients need to see the technology work on a large scale before they commit to purchasing it." Rowan checked his watch, 6:47 p.m. "We can warn the car owners, get police to those locations." "Can you? 53 vehicles, spread across 100 square miles. In less than 73 minutes. James laughed softly. "Even if you could reach them all, do you think they'd believe you? Would you have believed such a story a month ago?" Everly was already reaching for her phone. "I'll call the police, the FBI. By all means, but remember, Miss Stewart, I've been your CFO for 8 years. I know exactly how this company operates, who your contacts are, what your capabilities are." James stood smoothly. "You'll never stop this in time." As he walked toward the door, Rowan called out, "Where are you going?" James paused, his hand on the doorknob, "To watch the demonstration from a safe distance. Don't worry, you won't be forgotten. History will remember Stewart Automotive as the company that helped revolutionize warfare." The door closed behind him with a soft click, leaving 3 people staring at each other across a conference table, knowing they had just over an hour to prevent a massacre. and absolutely no idea how to do it. 7:23 p.m., 37 minutes until catastrophe. The Stewart Automotive conference room had transformed into a war room. Sarah's laptop displayed a map of the metropolitan area with 53 red dots marking the locations of compromised vehicles, while Everly worked 3 phones simultaneously. Police, FBI and her own security team. "It's not working," she announced, frustration cracking her voice. "The FBI wants documentation, proof, a chain of evidence. The police think we're delusional. We're running out of time." Rowan stared at the map, his mechanic's mind processing patterns and possibilities. "What if we're thinking about this wrong? We can't reach 53 people in 37 minutes, but we don't need to." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked. "James said the vehicles would fail simultaneously at 8 p.m. That requires a coordinated signal, probably cellular or radio frequency." Rowan's eyes brightened with sudden inspiration. "Sarah, can you access the city's emergency broadcast system?" "Theoretically, yes, but what good would—" She stopped mid-sentence, understanding dawning. "You want to jam the signal. Not jam it, override it. If we can flood the cellular towers with emergency broadcast data at exactly 8 p.m., it might interfere with whatever frequency James is using to trigger the sabotage devices." Everly looked skeptical. "Might interfere isn't good enough. We need certainty." "No," Rowan replied firmly. "We need a chance, and sometimes a chance is all you get." 7:31 p.m., 29 minutes. Sarah's fingers flew across her keyboard, accessing systems she wasn't technically authorized to touch. "I'm in the emergency broadcast network, but I need administrative codes to trigger a citywide alert." "What kind of alert?" Everly asked. "Doesn't matter, traffic emergency, severe weather warning, test of the emergency broadcast system, anything that will generate enough data traffic to overwhelm the cellular grid." Rowan grabbed Sarah's shoulder. "Wait, what if we trigger the sabotage early?" "What? Instead of trying to prevent the signal, what if we send it ourselves right now, while most of those cars are parked in driveways and parking lots instead of moving through traffic?" The audacity of the plan hung in the air like electricity before a storm. "Intentionally sabotage 53 vehicles to prevent a massacre during rush hour. That's—" Everly paused. "That's insane and probably illegal and might not even work." "But if it does work, we save lives," Rowan pressed. "Property damage versus human casualties. What's the choice?" 7:38 p.m. 22 minutes. Sarah looked up from her laptop. "I found something. The sabotage chips Marcus installed. They're not just receivers. They're transceivers. They communicate with each other in a network. If I can hack into one chip, I might be able to access the entire network." "The Porsche," Rowan said immediately. "The chip we removed from Mrs. Patterson's car, do you still have it?" Everly was already moving. "Evidence locker downstairs, Sarah. Can you interface with it?" "Give me 5 minutes and a prayer." 7:44 p.m., 16 minutes. They huddled around Sarah's laptop in the evidence storage room. The sabotage chip, connected by delicate wires to a jury-rigged interface that looked more like a science experiment than a solution to mass murder. "I'm in," Sarah whispered. "The network is active. I can see all 53 nodes and there's a countdown timer." The laptop screen showed a map identical to theirs, but this one had a digital clock in the corner. 0:15:47, 0:15:46, 0:15:45. "Can you stop it?" Everly asked. "Maybe, but Rowan's right. If we trigger the devices now, while the cars are stationary," Sarah's hands hovered over the keyboard, "I can send the activation signal early." "Do it," Rowan said without hesitation. "Everly, this is your company, your decision." Everly Stewart, who had built an empire through careful planning and calculated risks, looked at the countdown timer and made the most impulsive decision of her life. "Do it now." Sarah pressed enter across the city. 53 vehicles suddenly experienced simultaneous mechanical failures. Engines died in driveways, brake lines burst in parking lots, steering systems locked in garages. But instead of causing pile-ups during rush hour traffic, the sabotage cars simply became expensive paperweights in safe locations. The laptop screen showed all 53 network nodes going dark. 7:47 p.m., 13 minutes until the original activation time. "Did it work?" Everly asked. Before anyone could answer, Rowan's phone rang. The caller ID showed Detective Wilson. "We got him," she announced without preamble. "James Whitfield was arrested at a hotel rooftop bar downtown. Apparently waiting to watch some kind of traffic disaster that never happened. He's demanding to speak with you." 20 minutes later, in the police station's interview room, James sat across from Rowan and Everly, his composed mask finally slipping to reveal something like grudging respect. "Clever," he admitted. "Though you've only delayed the inevitable, my clients still received their demonstration, just not the one they were expecting." "Your clients received a demonstration of failure," Rowan replied. "Their expensive sabotage network was defeated by 3 people with a laptop and 17 minutes. James smiled coldly. "Do you really think I was working alone? Do you think this ends with my arrest?" But for the first time since this nightmare began, Rowan felt genuine confidence. "No, I think you had partners, backup plans, and probably a dozen other schemes we haven't discovered yet." He leaned forward. "But I also think you made the same mistake every criminal makes. You underestimated the people you were trying to hurt." 6 months later, Rowan stood in his corner office overlooking downtown, reviewing the final report on what the media had dubbed the Stewart Automotive Conspiracy. James and 3 co-conspirators were serving federal prison sentences. The sabotage network had been completely dismantled. Stewart Automotive had not only survived the scandal, but emerged stronger, with Rowan's security innovations making them the most trusted name in automotive safety. A knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. Everly entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the satisfied smile of someone who'd bet on the right horse. "Any regrets about that morning on Maple Street?" she asked. Settling into the chair across from his desk, Rowan looked out at the city where he'd once been homeless and hopeless, then back at the woman who'd seen potential where others saw only problems. "Just one," he replied. "I wish I'd thought to ask for that job interview sooner." They laughed together. 2 people who'd learned that sometimes the most desperate gambles pay off in ways no one could predict, and that the difference between success and failure often comes down to one simple question: are you willing to bet on yourself when no one else will?